As an ally, as a country that has such a huge amount at stake, we've got quite a lot of equity in what happens
Correct.
in November. And watching it last Friday was sad, wasn't it? When you saw how bad the president was.
It was pretty much as bad as it could have been. We all knew going into that debate that all President Biden really had to do was to look presidential. And ditto really for former President Trump. But unfortunately, right out of the gate, President Biden looked slow and weak and off message and struggling. And I don't think he ever really recovered. I know there was, as I say, initially there was a wall built around him by some Democrats saying, well, it's one bad performance, it's not going to decide the election. That tone is changing now not just inside the Democratic Party, but in their public statements.
Well, how many excuses have they had? First of all, he had a cold, and then secondly, many excuses. It was the time of day, and then he said in the last couple of hours to Democratic donors that he'd had all this international travel prior to the debate, but he'd been in Camp David for a week before preparing and resting.
Just over the weekend, Carl Bernstein, one half of the Bernstein and Woodward Washington Post pair that investigated Watergate, which led to the resignation of President Nixon. So no, anti-democratic journalist by any stretch. He said that his Democrat insiders have been saying for 12 months they have noticed a marked decline in President Biden's mental acuity. Now, that's secondhand from a journalist in Bernstein, but nonetheless, it sounds like, in a way, the Democrats have created their own problem. They've ignored a problem, and ignoring a problem never solves a problem.
Yeah, that's very true. Speaking of problems, but maybe one avoided and delayed for Donald Trump with that immunity, the presidential immunity decision by the Supreme Court. Still got legal questions, but this certainly adds a delay and an element of confusion that probably takes this all the way to the election before there's any resolution.
I think that's right. We need to remember that this decision of the Supreme Court applies to all presidents, past and future and current. It's not a decision that's solely about President Trump, but there's no doubt in the short term, I think it works to his political advantage in that there's almost no way that these major criminal proceedings will be finalised ahead of the November election, and that certainly, I would think, works to his political advantage. But lawyers and legal academics will be poring over this Supreme Court judgment for a long time. It's actually quite a complex judgment. It's not as simple as saying every president has absolute immunity for everything they do. There are three buckets of actions. The first one, right inside the president's wheelhouse, absolute immunity. Another one that extends just a little beyond that. There's a presumption of immunity that can be displaced. And then there's a third bucket, which is if a president acts outside their official capacity, there is no immunity. Where the boundaries lie on those will be decided through court cases.